Hi, girls and guys. I am today with a special guest, like all my guests anyway. So I've been thinking that all the topics that we are able to discuss in this forum, like gender equality, whether it's to do with how this is put into practice at workplace, or any other topics that we talk about surrounding women, I thought it would be a really cool idea if we could have, perspective on that from a man. So today I have a very dear friend of me with me, Shiv. Thank you so much, Shiv, for joining me, and I'm really, really looking forward to discussing this with you.
Hey Jags, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be part of your movement that's slowly taking over the world.
Thank you, thank you. So Shiv is a seasoned expert in management consulting. He's had an extensive experience working in this area. And Shiv, why don't we start with your experience over the years of working with different clients, and what is it that you enjoy the most in your role?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, my career's been an interesting one. It's I've been very lucky actually. I think at university, where I went to Aston University in Birmingham. I was determined to leave London and escape the family for a little bit. And so yeah, I went to Aston University where we did a placement year as well. So that's a 1 year placement at a company. And I was very fortunate enough to stumble into consulting through speaking with family friends. I always knew I wanted to do something that was broad based. You're not in a single box, you do lots of different things. And consulting seems to fit the bill because you're just trying to help businesses solve their problems. So I did my internship there. I was very fortunate to go to a global consulting leader. And I came back there as a graduate, and I was there ever since. I'd spent my whole career there, working my way up the ladder, working across multiple businesses, predominantly in the communications, technology, and media industries. But essentially, when my mum and dad ask me, what do? I just say, as a consultant, you are a business doctor helping to fix business problems. And I've been lucky to do that my whole career. And then when COVID hit, it just made me think about things differently. And I was inspired by lots of people setting up things and doing and taking different paths. And so I left my corporate career and I've set up my own consulting company called Emerge Management Consulting. Set it up end of last year. And currently my goal is to take all those learnings that I've gained and those techniques working with some of the world's biggest companies and to apply that to small and medium businesses and to help take them to the next level using some of those global learnings. So that's my career and where I'm currently at.
Great. Thank you so much, Shiv. So as you have worked with multiple companies, different corporations, and I believe different types of firms, whether they are investment firms or whatever other types of companies there are, I just wanted to ask you, do you have a view of initiatives that the companies have taken on in order to promote gender equality, whether it's about how it's done by different companies and where has it worked well? So what are your thoughts on that?
No, it's a really good question. Actually, I cheated before I spoke to you today. I had to think back to the whole last 10 years and where I've seen it work well. So I've made a few notes that I'll refer to. But I think, first of all, from my career, what I've seen, I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the world's leading companies. And the company itself I was employed by was an amazing firm as well. And what I would say is where I've seen initiatives work well, not just gender equality, but diversity and inclusion in general, is where it starts with the leadership. It starts with the leadership of those firms. When you see the managing directors, the senior management, the leaders really promoting diversity and inclusion and gender equality, it has to start from the top because these organizations are big organizations, right? It's typically a pyramid structure where the analysts and the new joiners, they're part of a really big pool. So it has to go from top to bottom. So from what I've seen, it really has to start with the leadership. And I've seen real leaders kind of embody that change. It's a cultural thing, right? It's part of who they are. Diversity, inclusion, and gender equality is a part of who they are. And I've seen these leaders really drive new initiatives. So we just talk about inclusion and diversity in general. One of the key themes that I've seen is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. that's been a core theme that's been discussed right through some of the companies I've worked with. And there's been various initiatives raised there. So I've seen something called Dare to Share, whereby every week anyone can submit a video talking about a topic that's very personal to them. And some people have talked about the loss of a relative, depression, dyslexia, struggling with their sexuality when they were younger, whatever it may be. That's been a really kind of general, really good initiative. And then there's been other newer ones more recently, where there was an initiative I'd seen, which was let's talk about race, let's get uncomfortable and let's talk about race. And often people of different ethnic origins have different experiences that it seems normal to other people, but it's not to them. And these were really powerful sessions and initiatives that were launched, because the type of topics that come up are quite surprising for people. Like when they share their experiences, they're really, really surprising. So there's some of the kind of more generic initiatives that I've seen raised. I think when it specifically comes to gender equality, what I've enjoyed through my career is again, it comes from the leadership. I've seen certain women leaders, and typically they've been at the firm for a long time. So I'm presuming they've experienced that inequality themselves, right? They've been a victim of it themselves in their lifetime, and because of that, it's really part of who they are. So I've seen them drive real initiatives like supporting Women's Days. There's lots of charities. I think I wrote one here. There was a charity called Girl Building, and there's a Women of the Future Summit. So there was these two key events. Women of the Future Summit is more for working women, and Girl Summit was a charity for young women. And they really drive them actively throughout the organization, encouraging involvement, encouraging participation, encouraging donations as well. So there's some examples of things that I've seen really from the top down, more generally across diversity and inclusion and diversity, but also gender equality as well. And I think another thing that I've seen is that it's good to have initiatives, but you need to operationalize a lot of them. And what I mean by that is it part of your business process, or is it a one-off talk, a one-off workshop, right? And I think one of the key areas in terms of operationalizing it, and I don't know, Jags, what your experience has been in your career, but it's encouraging women to apply for these jobs early on, right? Getting them into the pipeline, especially in traditionally male-dominated jobs like engineering and IT, etc., right? Because if you can encourage women to apply and get them more involved, then it will have a ripple effect in the organization. You're more likely to have women leaders in the future, and a greater balance in the future if you can get them in really, really early on. So again, some initiatives I've seen companies doing are within their job postings, making them less aggressive, making them less masculine. Like there's terms used sometimes in the industry, like ninja is a term, like a technical ninja or a technical rock star. Or sometimes you see these words and they're quite masculine words, and they can put females off applying as well. So I think having neutral language, and also there's a confidence gap as well from especially in technology and IT and consulting. Typically men overestimate their abilities, right? We see a job posting and a job requirements, and as long as we hit, I don't know, 50-60% of them, we think we're all good. Whereas what I've witnessed in my life is women often underestimate their abilities and feel that they need to meet 90 to 100% of that job spec in order to actually just apply. So I think neutralizing the application process. And there was a company, I can't remember the name now. I think it's called Blizzard. I've written it out. Blizzard Entertainment, that was it. So they make games for PC games, and that's quite a male-dominated area, right? But what they did was that, again, getting young women involved early. They went to campuses and found like women's clubs, like Women in Science, Women in Technology, promoted their internship to them, and women's applications to that internship rose over 120% or something like that. So it just shows you it's not just words, it's not just speeches, it's about bringing them in, actually operationalizing initiatives, going to campuses. Don't just just talk, you actually do it. And then you need to measure those metrics as well, right? Like how many companies actually are measuring how many women they've got, measuring how many women leaders are there, measuring these inclusion and diversity metrics. It can't just be a one-off thing. You have to continuously measure it as well. So yeah, there's some of the examples of things that I've seen, and it's not just having the talk, it's operationalizing it and then continuously measuring it as well. And then also, you know, underneath all of that, it's the continuous training. So I'm not sure what training is at your organization, but I personally had to attend a mandatory training session in my past job around unconscious bias. And it was amazing, right? I didn't realize that I had unconscious biases towards certain situations, certain people. And that's another thing, Jags. Often people aren't aware that they're displaying inequality or unfair behaviors. They're unaware of it themselves. So you need to create that awareness within the individual first if you want to have change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shiv. Like really great insights and very good examples. And you know, you talked about unfair, like unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias.
So what I was thinking is that sometimes even people who are being biased against, they don't know it's happening to them either because of the kind of conditioning we have in the society, and it takes a long time to undo that. So you know. Thank you. And you know, you mentioned about how men look at a job spec. I always look at 100%. I have to fit in 100% to apply for that job. So that's a very good tip. Thank you so much for that. And you also talked about women in STEM, like, you know, science, technology, engineering, maths careers. You know, we already know there's a leaky pipeline there. And I had this discussion with another guest of mine where we talked about how women enter into those, you know, first of all, there are not a lot of women who go into those streams as in academically. So when they do, then they, when they actually, you know, are employed at companies that are, you know, mainly tech and science, technology particularly, there's a leaky pipeline, which means that a lot of women actually end up, you know, exiting their careers in those kind of industries because, you know, of all the things that they have to go through and personally taking a break, you know, whether it's having children, whatever it is. And it's just how the whole system is, and nothing is going to change until everybody looks at the overall picture and tries to make tweaks and make things easier and, you know, provide the kind of support that's needed. So yeah, very, very valid points there. Thank you so much.
You make a really good point as well about the women, I guess, having children and going on leave as well. And one of the things I've seen at my previous employer is a lot of men take up shared parental leave, right, where they also take an extended period of time off. And so it's not just, you know, I think it's 12. I don't have a child, or nor am I married, so I wouldn't know the exact timelines. But yeah, they also take an extended period of time. My friend, just before I left my prior employer, he was off for a couple of months, and he really enjoyed it, and he really made the most of that time, right? And I think even a previous senior manager who I knew, she took time off when she had her first child, and when she came back, I just noticed there was a few differences about her, positive ones, right? One of them being, and she said this to me, I think she used to work quite late on a daily basis. Sometimes it's the nature of the consulting environment. But then she said, look, I'm only going to work late on these days. The rest of the days I'm clocking off at a certain time. And she was effective within those times. So there was no need for her to work late. Often we think if someone else in your team is, then you should as well. And it's not about that. And what she said to me, which really stuck with me, is, Shiv, you have to set your own boundaries, because no one is going to set your boundaries for you. No one is going to say, oh, you just had your first child, why don't you log off on time for 2 days of this week? She has to do that herself. And when she told me her boundaries, if anything, I had more respect for her, more admiration for her, because it was like, well, you're doing all this work within your boundaries, yet someone may be working a lot longer and a lot later, but having the same output as you. So you're more efficient, you're better at what you're doing. So I think it's also an element of sometimes breaking those expectations or those standards we feel are on us by just setting your own boundaries. Yeah. And sometimes people will respect you for doing so. Absolutely. It's hard to do it. It's easier said than done, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that is something that we need to practice, and the organizations need to practice and accept that as well. And you mentioned that about parental leave for men as well. So I was speaking to one of my friends, and given that it's the pandemic and everybody's working remotely, he said to me they've had a baby, and he said to me that he has valued this time so much because he's been working from home. He could take that break, be with the child. He's available. So this is something that we none of us had known, or this was just not an option at the time. I mean, even if it's an option, like, nobody's really thought about, okay, it shouldn't really be the woman taking up all those responsibilities and, not working, having to make all these sacrifices. But, if we could come up with a system where, the responsibility is shared, and even then, in terms of efficiency, like you said, it's all done, at the same time, you've got a shared responsibility at home, which generally would make people kind of more content and happier with things how they are going in their personal life. And at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time at work, and then companies have really started looking at well-being of people. So, we can't really differentiate anymore, like how you're feeling personally and how you're feeling professionally at work, because it's the same person, and we need to really take care of people and really take care of their well-being and make sure that they are supported in their personal lives to then be able to deliver at a workplace. So yeah, you make really good points.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's the same people, right? I think you're absolutely right. And in the same way, just like it's the same people, the environment, work and home is now the same, because we're all working from home. Well, pretty much most of us are working from home, right?
Yeah.
And someone said it to me the other day. They said, you're not working from home, you're living where you work, right? So it's the other way around, in just that it's two environments that have merged. And just be kind to yourself as well. And actually, you may have previously thought, male or female, that when you go to work, you can't show that you're tired from looking after your child, or you're tired from doing your home responsibilities. You've got to bring this artificial version to work. But actually now, some of the best calls I have is when the person's kid walks in, or like I was on a call today where one of the chaps, his kid came in and said, "Dad, can you tie my shoelace?" And it was just so human. It's just so human, right? And actually, it doesn't need to be this facade anymore. It's just the reality is we have a personal life, we have a work life, and they're often merged, and it's okay. We don't need to create this false illusion, especially for a woman, where they may feel like there's more roles that they have to fill and different faces that they have to show in different situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question, Shiv, is that how would you describe where we are today in terms of providing a fair work environment? And we've already touched upon this, but a bit more on from a gender lens. How far do you think we've come, and how do you see it going into the future? Like, how do you are you positive, or what is your thought, or what is your feeling about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know we talked a lot about the different initiatives, but in general, like where things are going, I think there's definitely been a lot of changes, right? As far as I can see, I think mental health and inequalities, whether it's race, gender, sex, even LGBT, all of these things, they were previously unspoken about. But as you said, like, the organizations are made of people have professional and personal lives, and these are aspects of their personal life and therefore their professional life. So it's definitely moved forwards. But I do think one of the benefits of the role I've had in the past many years is I've got to see different organizations, and I must say it does vary per organization, and it does vary per industry as well. So for example, I know that within oil and gas, they're quite male dominated industries. If I said to you an engineer in oil and gas, typically you would think of an older male engineer with this kind of like high vis coat, right? But what's interesting is that these industries, although typically they'd be male dominated, they have real like talent shortages nowadays. There's real gaps in talent, right? And no longer, a company won't now say, right, we have a talent gap, we need to, you look at companies like BP and Shell, and and then you look at companies like Tesla, who are focused on green energy. That's where it's going, right? So your industry is at risk of becoming obsolete unless you find cleaner alternatives. No one is going to say, oh, sorry, because you're a woman, we can't hire you. So so in terms of gender equality, it's two ways. One way is that typically certain industries have been male dominated or have inequalities when it comes to gender. However, the other side is that look at where the gaps are in talent. And I think if a woman thinks I am interested in that industry and there's a shortage of talent, then they'll get sucked up immediately, right? They will immediately go into there. So I think, yes, there are inequalities in certain industries, but within those industries where there are inequalities, there's also opportunity if you're interested in it. It all depends if you're interested in it, right? But no longer should a woman or a man feel that, right, you made the point about university earlier, no longer should they feel, the thought process shouldn't be typically women do these things, you know, nursing or whatever, and men do these things. I will therefore have a career in this. The discussion should be, one, what am I interested in? And two, where is the opportunity? Yes. Merge those two things together. And you know, as a nurse, your interest may be problem solving. That's still there, but then the industry shortages in oil and gas, can you not apply problem solving in oil and gas? So there's lots of opportunities there at the moment, but it does vary. And actually, one of the things I've noticed in technology is there's a drive. You hear things like AI being artificial intelligence, machine learning, and like Facebook and Instagram. We all use that. We all scroll our phones, but behind the scenes, there's all these complicated algorithms that choose what to show you, when to show you. This video that we're recording now will be shown to certain people depending on the algorithm. So there's this whole drive towards AI and machine learning. And because of that, there's a whole new requirement of skills that didn't exist, you know, 10 years or so ago. There were very, very minimal amount of skills needed in that space. So one thing I had noticed on projects that I've been on is that there's so many new women and females getting involved in that space, like data scientists, data engineers. So new industries that are popping up, new roles that are popping up that typically you would have thought are male heavily dominated. No, they're not. So male dominated industries are now forming sub-industries like technology, but within technology, you've got data science, data engineering, and those sub-industries are also opportunities for women as well, because they're new. They need people, they need skills. And if you're a woman, it doesn't make a difference. So yeah, it varies a lot, but let's look at where opportunity is. Instead of always trying to fix the old broken industries, let's create new ones, you know, and form the new ones.